Good afternoon, everybody. There are people still signing in. We'll give them a couple minutes. We will get started though here in a moment. All right. Well, it looks like most people are here. We should get started. My name is Tom Litwicky, and it's my distinct pleasure to serve as CEO for OPCS and to uh, facilitate these Housing First forums. Just as a reminder, the Housing First forums are designed to spread, encourage, educate, and get people to collaborate around what works and what seems to have good, strong evidence as being effective when working with people who are experiencing homelessness, addictions, mental illness, all the things that comes with that for some people. Um, I want to remind people that we'll take questions towards the end. If you mute your mic, that's helpful. Sometimes we get to hear people's other conversations if they happen. So please do that if you haven't already. Um, so what works, do what works and work together. That's my motto for 2025. Today we're going to be talking about homeless outreach and some of the work that's being done in the community with OPCS and other entities to try and reach out to those people who are unsheltered. As a reminder, our next session will be homeless encampments, and we will have Dr. Keith Bentley here for that episode, and he will be talking about so many things. One, he's an expert on it, but two, also different efforts and things that are happening around encampments, because we know that's uh, an important topic, an important issue. So, Deirdra has been here forever, right? She has been leading the charge in this. I think she just it was maybe her first job. I don't know, not really. But Deirdra has been is our director of shelter and everything else that she so willingly volunteers to cover. And I know dear to her heart is the work that she's been doing in outreach for a long time. So Deirdra isn't one of these folks who, like myself, who came into this in a management position, but has done outreach, has done case management, has been out there in the field for years, and has a wealth of knowledge about not just outreach and harm reduction in housing first, but to actually put it in operational practice. I think it's so critical that we talk about how we put these methods into practice and how they work when we do that. So, and then I also know that Deirdra has a previous client with her that's talking a little bit about those experiences. So,
I,
um,
I don't have that client with me.
you don't have that client with you.
No,
So
he
that
wasn't,
didn't happen.
yeah, he wasn't able to make it.
Aha. So
Yeah,
forget what I just said, and please join me in welcoming Deirdra. And we look forward to learning a lot from you. And afterwards, we can have question and answer, and I can help facilitate that in any way that's needed. If you have questions, sometimes people are like, "Oh, I'm going to forget." You can certainly put a question in the chat, and then I'll get to it towards the end of the presentation today. So it's all you, Dee.
thank you. So I just want to start by just saying, you kind of do have a previous client with you, and that's me. So, I actually came to Old Pueblo in, 2006 as a client. I had just gotten out of incarceration and was in recovery from a drug addiction. I was homeless in the streets in Phoenix, and decided to give Tucson a shot. I didn't want to go back to Phoenix, and I actually was welcomed at one of our female transitional housing that we had at the time, and I just kind of stayed. So I came in from client to admin assistant to a case manager, then a lead, then a program manager, and I just kind of kept going. And then I took a step back from being a program manager for reentry, and started an outreach. I think it was 2018, I want to say. The presentation that we're going to show you today is based off of a grant, the initial grant that I was hired for. And we had some really good results, and it just kind of changed my passion from, I mean, I'm still passionate about folks coming from incarceration because I came there for myself, but I'm super, super passionate about working with our unsheltered folks in the community. So I will quit talking about myself and get into this presentation. Okay, so homeless outreach and how you can help. So what is an outreach team? So an outreach team is made up of many different members. There's navigators, peer support specialists, peer guides, behavioral health consultants, medical assistants, nurse practitioners, case managers, students, and I'm sure that I'm leaving some out. It's basically called an interdisciplinary team. So we have been going out with El Rio as our medical and behavioral health consultant for many years now, since I've worked in this field. And so that's basically what makes it up. So some of the organizations that I know that are doing outreach in Tucson is us, of course, El Rio, the City of Tucson, Community Bridges, Primavera, and agencies that are supporting or providing MAT and detox services. So I'm gonna play a video for you. This was something that we recorded for a presentation that we did at a conference right after this grant ended. And I just think it has good information in it. I do want to say that a lot of it is taped prior to us moving into this building, into this facility. So you'll see like some construction slides, but we are now in our permanent home. Where is it?
We're really at a crisis right now.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
It comes to unsheltered homelessness in
Can
our
you hear it?
community. We've had over the last 5 years
Okay.
about a 300% increase in persons who are unsheltered and homeless. So this has reached a real health crisis level within our community that needs to be resolved. So much of the last 40 years of homelessness we've spent managing homelessness. We haven't spent solving homelessness. Old Pueblo Community Services has been serving people in Pima County since 1996. We focus on homelessness in a few different areas, one being veterans who are leaving facilities such as the psychiatric hospital or emergency room who are homeless. We serve folks who are coming out of incarceration, jail, prison, and then people who are living on the streets who are unsheltered and homeless in our community. But the string that kind of pulls it all together is homelessness. So people get help from OPCS typically through our outreach team, which is out in the community. We have an integrated medical and physical health and behavioral health outreach team that's out in the community every day, and housing navigators that help people get into shelter and into permanent housing. OPCS is different in the sense that we do adhere to the Housing First model. They're not going to be able to work on their mental illness if they don't have a place that they're able to stay where they're safe and they know that they'll have their basic needs met. Next year we'll be opening the Center for Housing First, and the Center for Housing First is the epicenter for growth of Housing First within Tucson. So the Center for Housing First will allow us to increase the amount of Housing First services within Tucson by about 40%. That includes employment, case management, behavioral health services, everything people need to be able to get off the streets, get into an apartment, and stay in that apartment and be successful. So when people move into their own apartment, that's not where it ends. We have permanent housing case managers who are out there who are helping people be good tenants, number one, and then to improve their health and wellness and to monitor their support and their needs. So someone might be with us 2 weeks, they may be with us 60 days, they may be with us a year in one of our shelter programs. They should leave when it's the right time for them to leave and they're going to be successful. And it's really a matter of opportunity. It's not so much that we have to change someone, we just need to be able to provide the opportunity and the ingredients for them to change. There's a few different ways that you can support OPCS in our work. One is to donate. You can give on our website. The other one is to help with our volunteer services, getting things out and the needs that people have in the community. And the third one is that you can become more educated and advocate for the Housing First model within your community. You can find out more about us online or check us out on social media.
Did I skip a slide? Oh, nope, I didn't. Okay. So that was our wonderful Tom. And just so you know that our building looks exactly like those pictures that was shown in that video. So that's kind of neat. So the outreach process, we find places to go based off of, sometimes we just get phone calls from concerned neighbors, or we're driving down the street and we're like, oh, look, there's a big homeless encampment right there, let's go out there. So it all starts there. We do make goodie bags. So we make hygiene bags and we make food item bags. And then depending on what the season is, dictates kind of what we put in there. So in the colder months, we would put gloves, beanie caps, warm socks. In the summertime, we put mosquito repellent, which I was really surprised that was the one thing that we weren't putting in our bags that many folks were asking us for when we went to the encampments. And we would, put some flip-flops in there, or, some maybe cooler socks. And so we go out and we communicate with the folks, and most times we complete a VI SPDAT with them, which is like a housing screening tool. And then that goes into our coordinated entry system, and we keep it updated every 3 months to make sure that they're not like falling through the cracks. We do enroll in our outreach programs, or refer them to coordinated entry, one of the two. And then we try to place them in our low barrier shelters. And then the outreach department, the navigators kind of navigate them into benefit enrollment, case management, peer support, employment. They help them get documents to get them set so that we can refer them for a specialty Section 8 voucher, or get them set for if they get pulled through coordinated entry. Once all those services are provided and we actually get the voucher, or we get them to the agency that is sponsoring them, then they move into permanent housing. And it's kind of like Tom said in the video, it could be a 30-day period. It could be, we've had people that have been with us for more than a year, they're just not ready yet. So let me go to the next one. So peer guides. So this particular grant that we were doing, we were awarded funding to actually go into the encampment. Usually when you go into an encampment, there is a leader living there. And we would approach that person, let them know what we were doing. And then we would hire people living in the encampment to go out to other encampments with us, and we would pay them cash daily. And it was something that really worked. It also helped build like trust um and yeah, it really was successful. So these are two of the peer guides. We actually, I think we used these two gentlemen quite a bit. They were very helpful. They had been out and living on the streets for a very long time, so they knew where a lot of the encampments were located. And then there's just a couple of quotes that they said, for this slide. Just giving somebody hope is a pretty big deal. So many people broke bread with me. They didn't have anything, so I thought I should try and pay them back some way. That was Enzio, and then Smokey. OPCS is like family. Even though it's an agency, they can call me anytime, any day of the week, sick, whatever, I'm coming in. I'll make myself available because they made a home available to me. So these are just some of the examples from the project. It just goes through, gender and ethnicity, race, and then 48% screened positive for SUD, which is substance use disorder. Average years of homelessness was 4, and identified as LGBTQIA plus was 13%. So our successes, we contacted over 2,200 unsheltered folks through this outreach team. We enrolled 327, and 260 were permanently housed, and this was over a period of 5 years. So abstinence from substances went up, so to 66%. Employment, education went up 24%, social connectedness went up 89%, and income from all sources went up 61%. So at the follow-up GIPRS that we completed with folks, their mental health symptoms had went down by 25%, and their drug and alcohol use had went down by 72%. So some of the challenges that we faced and we still continue to face in some aspect or another is just, our participant related challenges are complex health conditions, mental health, SMI, SUD, created barriers for housing and service options, participants' readiness for services and independent housing. Program related was shortage of housing vouchers. So we are only allotted a certain amount of housing vouchers a month. And so we prioritize our folks that are coming in through outreach and that are at our shelters. Obtaining identity documentation, quashing warrants. So I think this was more of not only, I think it turned into a funding issue there for a minute. We do have funding for it and the grants, but we were serving way more people than we thought we were going to serve. And so when we ran out of money, we had home funds, we could get documentation. Sometimes it's really hard to get somebody documentation if they don't have anything and they if they've never had an ID in Arizona before, it becomes a little difficult. Working with landlords. So even though our clients were closed out a few months after being housed, we still would go out and work with the landlords if they needed mediation. We would work with Section 8 if they were in violation of their contract with Section 8 so that they didn't lose their voucher. And we still continue to do it to this day. Additional funding for critical items such as transportation, phones, food, client fees, startup kits for newly housed. So lessons from outreach. So one of the biggest things that we learned was they didn't trust us. Nobody trusted us until we kept going back and we kept doing what we said we were going to do. So I would just say that if, you're working for another agency, or, you're maybe supporting somebody who's unsheltered, just to, be transparent, and just whatever you tell them that you're going to do or you can commit to, just keep that commitment. So a client-centered approach. So we use a client-centered approach. All of us that work for outreach are very empathetic, and we all have a willingness to go above and beyond to support all of our clients. Strong communication and coordination. So a function of trauma-informed and client-centered approaches is strong team communication and care coordination. The outreach team used multiple mechanisms to communicate in a timely and effective manner. So long-term engagement. So this was a lesson that we learned as well. When we were first rolling out this grant, we were closing folks out just shortly after they were housed. That was not a good idea, so we kind of altered it, and we kept them open for at least 3 months until they were settled, and we felt like they were stable enough to be without as much support. And if they did need extra support, we transferred them to permanent supportive housing case manager. So landlords, so pre-negotiations with transparency to obtain a pool of landlords that could potentially house our populations. So we struggled with this as well. Landlords aren't, a lot of them, standing in line to take Section 8. We still struggle with it, even though I believe that there's and maybe Tom, you can talk about this a minute. There's like a city ordinance saying that all apartment complexes have to accept Section 8. Is that true?
Yeah, it's sort of essentially what it says is that you can't refuse to lease an apartment to someone as a tenant solely because they're using a voucher. So you would have to find another reason, which I imagine that's what property owners probably do. So,
Oh, yeah.
so it doesn't necessarily have a lot of teeth in it, but it's a start.
Right. So, and then the biggest thing was resources. So usually, so when an outreach worker comes into Old Pueblo, one of the first things that I ask them to do when they're done onboarding, is to go out to the other shelters, get contact information, touch base with all these resources, because if we didn't have the resources that we have, I don't think we would be very successful. It takes a village, basically. So that was probably the biggest lesson that we learned. So call to action: advocate for increased funding, specifically individuals with increased vulnerability due to experiencing mental illness and substance use. Increase low barrier housing and services. Engage in collaboration with other providers and stakeholders to improve resources. So how can the community help? So if you were wanting to report an encampment, you could use the link here to report it to the city of Tucson. For resources and inquiries about services provided at OPCS, I gave the phone number. We're always taking donations, so items for outreach kits, non-perishable food items, socks, water, etc. I listed my number, and the program manager over outreach, I listed her name and number as well. And then to donate financially, I listed Monica Duran's information. So that is my presentation.
We have a
Yeah.
couple questions or a few questions to start with. Dee, maybe you can answer this one from Gary. What exactly determines the number of housing vouchers available? Is this a City of Tucson issue or strictly a budget issue?
It's a City of Tucson issue. So, um, so the City of Tucson, we had access to quite a bit of vouchers, but so did a lot of other agencies. And what happened was they overspent. And so they put a freeze on the vouchers, and that freeze lasted for almost a year. When the freeze was lifted, I think there was 2 agencies in Tucson that they gave, I'll just say it, 10 vouchers a month to. We were one of them, because we follow up with our folks. And then the other one, of course, is the City of Tucson. It's a different department. So I think the other agencies got moved down to 2 or 3 vouchers a month. So that's only for these specialty HPP vouchers. I believe that our Pima County Housing First program gets an extra 10 vouchers a month. So we're currently getting 20, but only 10 that we can use for our low barrier shelters, if that makes sense, because they're different types of vouchers. So
Just because we have the encampment link up, I'll skip to the third question first. What is the anticipated result of reporting an encampment with the link?
So, if you report an encampment to that link, it's monitored by the City of Tucson. They have a special department for it. And the guy that monitors it is the one who puts the encampments in tiers. So, and a tier is based off of basically how dangerous is it? How dangerous is it to keep this encampment? So what they go out and observe, that determines what happens to that encampment. If they decommission it right away, or they send our multidisciplinary outreach team out to start working on documents for folks and trying to get them into shelter and then getting them into housing, which is a pretty fast process. So there's a lot of different things that go into that. I'm pretty sure if you go to that link, I don't know what all of them are. I do know that once they get them, they go out to outreach teams. So sometimes that's one of the ways that we find encampments that we're going to.
All right, go back to the second question. Tom, this might be a good one for you. Given the current administration's intolerance for language that addresses important OPCS client groups such as LGBTQ, what are we doing or will we do to continue to secure federal funding through the grants and contracts mechanism?
Well, that's a fantastic question and a tough question to answer, but it's certainly an important question right now with what's going on. So right now, what we're doing is really preparing. So we're staying true to what we do and have been very clear as an organization that we still serve everyone and we still welcome everyone and want, this diverse workforce, and we want to be supportive of everyone that comes to us. What might change, and what I've kind of heard from others, is that some of the language might change on how we do that. So instead of saying that, we are actively seeking a diverse population of folks either in the organization to work or in our services, we may be able to say we things that are a little bit more standard, like, we don't discriminate against people, or we don't, that sort of thing. I think a lot of what's at least maybe the public's impression is that the type of things we're doing around inclusion and diversity are somehow setting quotas or things like that, which we never have. So we simply are trying to reach employees. We're trying to reach people in the community as clients. And we're trying to find different and diverse ways of doing that. So I don't think structurally there's much that we have to change. Some of it may be in language. The other thing that I think is going to be really important is um, as HUD and others start to look at this diversity, equity, and inclusion, are they saying that entities that do this sort of work with their own funding or separate funding, because we've never used federal funding for these efforts? Um, is that something that will keep us from getting future grants or not? A week ago, I would say that the federal government was suggesting they wouldn't fund those, but they wouldn't necessarily stop all your funding. Today, it looks like they may try and stop all funding based on that. So, no, probably a horrible answer, Gary, but it's really a matter of just trying to continue to monitor and watch and try to continue doing what we're doing without inciting any attention on the federal level, if we can avoid it. But
All right, the next question from Kathleen is, what is the most common reason or barrier for someone not enrolling in one of OPCS's programs?
What's the most common? I feel like it would be not enough funding. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. I mean, if we have 5 outreach workers currently. So I'm not suggesting that we need more money for outreach workers, but I am suggesting that we need more funding for more shelter. We need more funding for things like documents, funding for these move out kits. And, I'm probably our, I probably bug Monica a little bit too much because I feel like if you put somebody in an apartment and they don't have furniture, they're not going to treat that like a home. They're going to treat it like where they came from because they didn't have anything. And so we're constantly looking for funding for, or donations of furniture and, how can we get these move-in kits? And so I think the biggest thing for me to answer that would be funding.
yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think one of the pieces between the funding and I think the other barrier is, you mentioned it earlier, Dee, which is this trust. I think sometimes, in fact, I don't think sometimes, I know that there are times historically when entities, to include governments, have gone out to parks and just said, hey, I'm so-and-so, want housing? And people tell them, no, go away. And then they say, well, they're service resistant. Well, they're not necessarily service resistant. They just don't trust you. And they have failed so many times in shelter and services that they're very hesitant to engage again. So when people, and on top of it, they're experiencing medical conditions, mental health conditions. And so it takes time. You can't just walk into the park and say, hey, and there are some people that are ready to go and are trusting, but there's certainly going to be a group of people that I think we really try and work with a lot, who it's going to take some time to build that trust, to build that relationship. And so that trust becomes a real barrier. Their past experiences, I think, become a real barrier, because here Dee's trying to tell them, well, this is low barrier shelter. This is different. We're going to meet you where you're at. We're going to help you get better and treat you in a certain way and not just kick you out if you make one mistake. And, at some point people have to believe, Deirdra, that this is true, and that takes time.
It takes time and it's word of mouth as well. So,
Yeah.
that population is pretty, I mean, you'd be surprised at how tight knit they are. You know what I mean? They all talk. So, a lot of the times that's how we get through to them as well. Oh, I've heard of you. You housed my buddy out here. And then, so that opens a door for us.
And I think the money is a great point too, just that the reality of it is, if we need, X amount of money, then right now, probably between the federal, state, local, everyone else, donors, we probably have, 40% or 30% of what's needed. So you're always kind of treading upstream and
Mhm.
trying to put out fires in crisis if you don't have enough funding. And it's just a fact, it's a reality. And we will continue to work to try and get more awareness and more funding. And I think maybe some of the reasons that we don't get funding sometimes in this work is because we haven't emphasized enough the fact that there are evidence-based practices that work. That over 80% of the people that Deirdra helps get into permanent housing stay in permanent housing. So it works, it's effective. And people I think maybe might be more motivated to give the things that they know work.
Yeah.
All right, then I see one last question. Do members get assigned to a voucher need to score for PSH on the VI SPDAT? Or does OPCS administer these vouchers independently of coordinated entry?
So these specialty vouchers do not go through coordinated entry. They're done through referrals to the city. And they do not, so anybody that we assist, we ask that they score an 8 or higher on the VI SPDAT. But we also have a risk screener that tells us to who to prioritize. So if that makes sense. So it doesn't go through coordinated entry, and we prioritize based off of score um, and the screener we use.
I think that's it for the questions.
Yes. I had this feeling that one more was coming in, but I don't see it. I don't know why I had that feeling, but
Well,
Deirdra, I'm curious, are you saying there's been this, and I didn't, giving you surprise questions. I should have gotten questions to you beforehand, but,
That's
uh,
okay.
are you experiencing yet, this afternoon, I'm going to, speaking at or running a focus group at a panel at a conference about older adults who are experiencing
Mm.
homelessness. Are you starting to see more unsheltered older adults?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, absolutely. And that's one of the questions that's on our screening form, because they don't really ask that on a VI SPDAT. So, just things about, well, we don't ask them if they're old, you know what I mean? But obviously, but just if they need medical equipment that requires electricity. But I have seen an uptick. In fact, all of our bottom floor units at the Econo Lodge, because they're mainly elderly folks, or somebody that might have a physical impairment. So all of those rooms are full. They're always full. As soon as somebody's gone out of it, another person goes right into it. So yeah, I've seen an uptick in it for sure.
Okay, yeah, definitely. It seems to be, I haven't seen a ton of, actual numbers yet. Maybe we'll see this newest street count, but it does seem anecdotally to be increasing, and
Mhm.
people are talking about seeing a lot of older adults as a first time homelessness, that it isn't the long term, which in some ways might be a little easier to get them into housing and services if it's their
Mhm.
first time. They don't have as long of a history of evictions and things like that, maybe, but we'll see, I guess.
Oh, got another
Yeah.
question. Does OPCS have any collaborative efforts underway with PCOA?
We actually have people in training with them today.
Yes, definitely. So
Yeah.
we do. Fantastic question. Some people, they do have a conference today about older adults and homelessness to connect case managers and outreach workers with PCOA and others. Um, they're just now, Mark Clark retired, and they have a new CEO who I've worked with before, very impressed, Robert Ojeda. and he is, we'll be collaborating with them more about that. We're trying to do some programs that would help older adults live in safer areas and be closer to medical care and things like that by providing an extra subsidy. So I think that will help with those connections because we'll have something to actually, tangible to offer. But definitely we are working with them, and they're an important group. I could come up with more tough questions for you, Dee.
Well, I like to be, on the fly, so.
Yeah.
And if I can't answer it, I'll just tell you I can't answer it, so.
It's I really like to hear you talk about the uh folks who were homeless or very recently homeless that were helping as guides. Um it seems like that would be a good thing to continue or bring back
Yes,
if we could.
yes.
Um Yeah, that seems like something because I don't think that's something we had funding for it for a while, but it seems like something that might be worth having longer term, funding from the agency to be able to do that. And it probably isn't that expensive, I imagine.
Like, it was in not only the SHP grant, but it was in the old H3 grant. And for whatever reason, and I might want to go back and check, I don't know if the new one has the funding in there for it. I just don't think so. I don't know
Well,
why they pulled it.
maybe we need to find some other funding.
Sure.
Nicole does so many of our new grant applications.
Nicole.
She's thinking about a grant application as we speak, I bet.
I'm always thinking about grants,
Uh,
but
but
unfortunately, the government has stopped releasing much in the way of announcements. So we're having to really look at foundations and other types of organizations.
Yeah, that's a interesting thing, Nicole. You had mentioned a while back that basically websites were coming down or items were being removed. And I
Mhm.
imagine we haven't seen that change with the court rulings. It's still kind of things are
Yeah,
still
there's still a
common.
lot of information missing from websites like SAMHSA and HUD that I assume were just on the forbidden vocabulary list. Um, but as just reading one of the organizations that I'm a member of, there's a website apparently tracking everything that's been taken down, which could be helpful because it's hard to even know what's missing. But it's nice to see the research community coming together and helping come up with language to craft future applications and um, you know collecting data that may have been removed and being willing to share it and all that.
Yeah, it's really dramatic. It's really draconian. I don't know what to call it. So trying to find somewhat not terms that I think would work, but it's for one administration to remove research that they don't agree with is a new thing. That's a you might not they might not historically have promoted it as much but to flat out remove all mention of research throughout federal websites and databases for things that is good research. It just doesn't align with the president's vision is a bit surprising and definitely sets the tone of kind of the culture, the federal government culture we're in right now. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Uh, and I think you're right. We know that we are working now to really get the community more involved, to include foundations, donors in the community. That's an important part of this work and will require that to be successful. Um, and with the current situation, it just becomes all that much more important to engage the public. We've always known we'd have to engage the public to be successful, but now it's survival of nonprofits will depend upon local community support. Well, I don't have any other questions. I don't know if we want to end a little bit early today. That's fine. I don't see any others coming in.
If anyone has questions, they can always email Dee or call her.
Oh, yeah.
And this is recorded and available, going to be available somewhere. I think it goes out to people and then,
We'll pull down the recording, chop out the beginning bits probably, and then have it shared. Monica will share it on social media, I assume.
okay. Deirdre, thank you for your time. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Nicole and Raul, for supporting this,
Yes.
these sessions. And remember, we'll be seeing Keith Bentley in March to talk about encampments and the protocols behind that and what research there is about how to support and help reduce encampments in the community in a very humane, compassionate, but also effective manner. So that'll be a very interesting presentation, I think. Adios.